Hello, and welcome to Module 8 of the Temporary Chair Caucus Training. I'm Seth Cohen, your Caucus Director. You may notice my voice from the last two sections. Here we're going to be talking about the presidential preference cards. You heard about these a little bit in the What's in My Packet section, and in this module we're going to be going a little bit more in depth into what they look like and why we're using them. So the goals of this session are to understand what the design looks like, so you're familiar with the presidential preference cards, or as you'll see noted here, PPCs, to abbreviate, understand what they're going to look like, and when you get them in your packets, to know how they're going to be used, and it'll allow you to understand what to expect when you see them. Since this is a new thing that's for all caucus goers, there have been some changes to the caucuses this year, and this is something that'll be completely new to every single caucus goer, whether they've been caucusing since 1972 or this is their first time. We want you to understand that how the presidential preference caucus cards are going to work once they're in the caucus room, and then understand the purpose of why we decided to use this for this year. Presidential preference card design. So this is what side one is going to look like of your presidential preference card. They are going to be 10.5 by 5.5, so about a half sheet of paper, and they're going to be printed on cardstock. So they're going to be a little bit thicker. I will also say that there are going to be some slight changes to these, as we're going to be adding in a couple of security measures to make sure that they can't be copied. And so you will see these, but they'll be in a little bit different form come caucus night, but nothing too major. On side one, or as you can see here, the blue side, and you will find the place for the caucus goer to print their first and last name, their voting address, their city, and their zip code. It is really important that people print legibly so that we can read these if we need to in the case of a recount. Then there is the first preference. So you'll see here, print again, we want to make sure that we print legibly so we can read this. The first and last name of the candidate that you support during the first expression of preference. And I know that there are some people who are worried about the spelling of their candidates. And so in later trainings and information that we'll be putting out through the Iowa Democratic Party, we will put out guidance on what we can accept as names for the candidates. And then you must also sign the presidential preference card. It is not valid unless it is signed. So in the event of a recount, if you forget to sign your card, your preference may not be counted for your desired candidate. Side two of this, so you'll just flip it over. Again, is the yellow side. So there are two distinct colors to make it easy for everyone to distinguish those two sides. Again, on the top, you'll have your place where you can print the first and last name of your desired candidate for your second or final expression. And again, you must sign this side for it to be valid. You will see below this, there are two sections. So there is a section for you to choose to not realign. If you choose to not realign because you are so supportive of the candidate that you have and you don't want to align for anyone else, you can check this box and you must sign above to show that you chose to not realign. This is a perfectly acceptable thing to do, but we wanted to give you the option to do that so we understand that if you left this second side blank, we would know that you chose to not align with another candidate. Just to the right of that, you will see something that may look a little confusing, but it says only use in F6C situation. So this is meant for, if you remember back in the caucus math section, when there are too many groups that are viable, there are more groups viable than delegates to be awarded. In this scenario, your temporary chair, you will announce that Group A must realign because they are the smallest group, and then they will fill out their third preference in this area. So they will again write the first and last name of their candidate they chose to align with a third time, and they will put their initials. There will be further training on this for you as we get closer to caucus date, but this is how you would fill out the presidential preference card. I will also note that you will see that all of these cards will be have the name of the county, the name of your precinct, and numbered starting at 001. The party, the IDP, will be providing a set number of cards for each precinct, and they will be numbered all starting at 001 through the number that we have provided for your precinct. For those of you in larger precincts, we will go into more depth once you are a confirmed temporary chair about what to do if you were to potentially run out of presidential preference cards. So we will have that in a later training for you once you are a confirmed temporary chair. Now, going through a step-by-step process of how to use these cards in the room. So step one, when you are counting eligible caucus goers in the room, you will hand out presidential preference cards. Only one person should do this, and it should be you at this point, you would be the permanent chair of the caucus. And then we are doing this because they are numbered. If you're handing them out in numbered order, you'll know exactly how many were handed out, and it'll match the count that you were doing as you were handing them out. Here in step two, you'll use the presidential preference cards to count against the number on the presidential preference cards. So as I said, you'll be counting and then handing them out and just double checking all of your numbers match. You'll calculate your viability. You'll announce it to the room so that everyone knows what viability is. The first alignment will begin. You'll run through the first alignment process. Second alignment will end. You'll then instruct all caucus goers to fill out only side one or the blue side of the presidential preference cards. As you're counting preference groups with the help of volunteers and precinct captains, and step 7, to double check who is viable and who is not. Then, with the help of your precinct captains for the viable groups, so this is important here, so only the viable groups, precinct captains will collect the presidential preference cards, and they will hold on to them until they need to be stored properly. And this is done so that we can make sure that people who are in viable groups are not filling out both sides of the presidential preference cards. So then in step 9, you'll inform the caucus of the realignment time, explain to caucus goers how to indicate they choose not to realign. You'll begin the realignment phase. The realignment phase will end. Next, you will instruct those who are not viable. So only people at this point who are not viable should have their cards still left in their hands to fill out side 2. You'll count the delegates for the final count, and then you'll allocate your delegates as we have talked about in previous sections. Now, the purpose of the presidential preference cards are to provide a paper trail of what happens in the room. So these are really going to be able to help us if there needs to be a recount, but it also gives us a better idea of the movement of what happened in the room. It will also allow us to accurately reflect what happened during the caucus. In years past, we've never really known what happened in the caucus room, and this will give us a party a better idea of what was actually happening during each 1,677 caucuses across the state. And last but not least, if there is a recount, these cards will allow us to, again, reenact what happened in the room, because we can physically move them around to say, okay, here's where everyone was during first alignment, here's where they moved during second alignment, and we can check against sign-in sheets to make sure that people who signed up actually turned their cards in, and that all is good and the counts were accurate. So if you have any questions, again, reach out to your local county chairs or your local organizers, and we hope to see you on caucus night.